Baik, selamat pagi semuanya. Salam sehat dan salam hijau dari PI2KL Corner. Kali ini Anda masih bersama saya, Evi Yulia Tiovi, dan kita akan berbincang-bincang terkait dengan Sustainable Forest Management bersama dengan Professor Eduardo Rojes Briales, bersama dengan kolega saya dari Spain, dan ini akan menjadi perbincangan yang menyenangkan. Okay, so hello, good morning.
Good morning.
So we have Eduardo Rojes Briales here, and I would like to memperkenalkan beliau sedikit ya. Jadi beliau adalah President of the Program for the Endorsement of Forest Certifications, dan juga beliau adalah Chairman of the Spanish Board of Foresters, dan beliau merupakan profesor yang aktif di Polytechnical University of Valencia, Spain. Okay, so we're going to have discussions talking about sustainable forest management and going a little bit deep to the issue of forestry workers, because I think that forestry workers is one of important component when we're talking about sustainable forest management, in which unfortunately still not got serious concerns from many parties. So could you please, this is the first question for you, so what is your comments about this campus?
Well, thanks for the invitation to come to the forest faculties on EPP, and it's a pleasure to be here, even if it's a short visit. And on your question, it's really a timely issue. Despite sustainability is defined in these three legs of environmental, social, and economic pillar, and despite Rio Plus 20 in 2012 insisted that these three pillars need to be more integrated than in the past, we have had, by the fact that economy is at the end determinant, especially I would say in the 60s, 70s, a very clear economic approach to forests. And then later the environmental issues, very especially around climate change and biodiversity, eventually less in other issues like soil and water that I think are as well very important, has taken a strong dominance of the debate and even of science. But we have not paid sufficient attention to the social issues. And I think this is what you comment on the workers is just an indicator or a symptom that we need to pay much more attention to the social dimension of forests.
Yes.
And there may be even many answers to critical issues. And the workers' condition is one of them. And it's true that we have, very especially in full developed countries, I think this issue is more or less sorted out, and also there's a high advance of machinery and so on. But in the rest of the world, it's an issue that really needs much more attention. And a first step for that is that we have information. And one big problem is that we have really very, very scarce information on the social dimension, including the workers. And this is something that needs to be tackled. In the time I had the honor to lead the forest department in FAO, this was one of our worries. And in fact, the State of the World Forest Report 2014 was devoted exactly to it. Let's even have the information, even a rough information, but forestry contributes to the livelihood, especially in forest areas. And we got certain first information. For example, the firewood was the first contribution, and a few others. But for sure, this issue of the conditions, work conditions, not only salaries, working conditions, security. I think you're an ergonomy professor, so all this area needs proper attention and research and information. For example, just coming here, I saw some places where they were processing either wood or bamboo. Most likely many of these are even not are informal.
Yes.
This makes that we want to present the Minister of Finances reasons to invest in this area you have a lot of shadow information regarding the people that are really working, because an important part is informal information. An important part is even seasonal work. So that is the first step to move forward, is having information, devoting time. And I'm sure that the more we do in this area, the more we will have an emergency of information that ensures that really the political attention that is devoted to forest, also in forest dominant countries like this, is by far too little. So it's important. And then there is a second issue that is most likely also related, especially in countries that have a predominant state forest ownership, is that it's important to see how we can retain this for the communities, because there's always a substract of community ownership there behind. This issue, when the countries become independent, to say everything of the state, was in a wake of a policy direction that has passed. And in fact, the more we recognize the communities, the better it will go. And I would just put an example of a country that also has the same ownership, is different climate, which is Turkey. But there's quite a well-arranged state forest service. And they have a preference to the locals to do all the operations, be everything that improves forests, so planting, thinning, pruning, whatever, and the logging. And only if the community is not able or doesn't want or is not interested, then they hire externals. So in this sense, these retain resources. And even this community receives 10% of the netto selling value of timber or whatever. So these kind of models, in order also to also acknowledge them as the best stewards of the forest, these communities, I think as well a very important part of the solving this equation.
Yeah, but sometimes when you talk about this community, local people working as forestry workers, from my study I found that most of them have weak bargaining position because they have no good competencies as workers, and then the payment system is really based on piece rate of work payment system, which make them very weak in financial aspects. So what do you think about this? Do we have to, from which point that we have to make any changing to make the situation becomes more better?
Yes, it's true that these very local approaches might have certain limits, especially in the wake of mechanization. And the fact that even if in the beginning these processors have entered basically in boreal conditions and other different climatic conditions, they're improving, and I'm not following the details in the tropics, but I was very skeptical in the mountains of Southern Europe, and we have them at the end now today, and 90%, 80% of wood is felled by processors. The more you mechanize, the more complex it is just to use this available local manpower. And also, I don't know, in Indonesia, but there are many areas where these very forest dominant areas, people are emigrating. So even you may have not sufficient workers. So these two factors may be a certain break to this approach. On the other hand, mechanization opens opportunities to increase wages. And this is important. And of course, it's relevant, and there, I get more from the perspective, just from the academic perspective, also to what we do in PEFC, is to have really in one of our key indicators when the performance and the certification is reviewed is that the laborers are having conditions that are adequate, that are of course regular workers, not informal, and so on, and that respect the laws of the countries. It's true that wages, when a country has still an average GDP per capita that is relatively modest, are still into a low level, and it is very important that the overall forest economy will not be able to solve this issue. It is very important in rural forest dominant areas, not in the rest, that overall the country moves these salaries up. And I think Indonesia is surely in that path due to its development, that other sectors that are more potent get the salaries to a higher level. This is a difficult process. It also generates, in the experience of many other countries that went through this process, a very high intensive to develop and move forward. But at the end, it is important that together with the big players, the state as owner, the companies that execute the operations, these communities are more and more empowered. If this third leg is integrated here, because it is not just the state and so on, it is also the locals, the more of not only the manpower, but also the value added of this forest can be incorporated to rural people and see how they can process also through non-wood forest products. This includes also female workers. The operations are less harsh. That opens opportunities so that we are able to retain, if the forests are very important for climate, for water, for many things that are global or even regional, and also affect the urban centers that are much more developed for sure in this country than the rural areas. Also, these rural areas have a compensation for this role of stewards of these areas, and also this discussion on payment of environmental services, so on, where we have interesting example in many countries, but surely Costa Rica is the most advanced, that the watershed function is acknowledged, the carbon function is acknowledged. This is also important.
Yeah, okay, thank you. But this is regarding to your statement about forest mechanization, yeah? In others region, perhaps they'll start to use the tree harvester, fellow branch processor, but in others region, we still have very manual system, like handsaw or portable chainsaw, which is actually one source of hazard, yeah? Yes, it is give us higher productivity, but it also bring more severe hazard to the people. So what I want to know is, how much the importance to bring these mechanizations into the forest operations. When we talk about sustainable forest management, perhaps, yeah.
I think one aspect there, it's true that processes are much easier in plantations, if you have plantations, than in natural forests. But as a comment, I was not, when they saw the first one 40 years ago, I was saying, no, in steep slope it will not work, which is in our case the most critical issue. And as the Austrians have steep slope, now today they are working really incredible slopes. So, and there is also the possibility to take the logs through crown. So there are different options. But even if you have operations with chainsaw and so on, I think another avenue that has helped in many countries is that, and it is not only affecting forest workers, it's affecting many areas, that eventually countries sometimes focus only on the higher education. We are here in a university, but it's very important for a country. And I would say one of the key countries that has very clearly a success thanks to that is Germany and Central Europe, is to focus on professional vocational education. This is crucial. You may have the best engineers. If you don't have the operators that are able to do it, you have a gap. Yes. And this explains why Germany could be reconstructed after the war so fast and so efficient. Because they had the engineers, but they had also the skilled workers. Yeah. And we focus, why today Africa's development is basically done by Chinese and not by Africans? It's because they don't have that. They have PhD people in the best university of the world, but they don't have the specially skilled workers. Okay. And the value added they didn't take by the Chinese, instead by the locals. Because there is lots of workers, but without any training. And sometimes also not a long discipline. Also, when they get the cash of the month, they disappear and come the next later when they have spent it. So, and the companies want to have permanent sale, but that is another issue. So in many developed countries, to exercise certain risk or critical jobs, you have to have a vocational training.
Yes, yes.
And I think that is also a way to reduce the number of potential operators, but to ensure that those who are having this risk have a training and education, have a wage that is commensurable to it. But this is the same if you go to a butcher. In Germany, a butcher cannot be the just guy that comes around. He has to have had 1 to 2 years of practical vocational training. because there is a nutritional risk for humans. So it's a policy that engages saying, no, you don't only need to have academic, of course, a doctor has to be trained, or engineer, you need as well these skilled workers levels.
Yes.
Wherever there is risk, there is critical equipment, there is issues of health and so on, this person has to have. Yes. And this also is a very important mechanism to reduce risks that people have been correspondingly trained.
Yeah, I very agree with you. This is a mechanism under what we call as professional certification program for forestry workers. Yeah, in Indonesia, we have only 31 forest chainsaw operators who have this certification of the professional already, and this is only 31 individuals among perhaps thousands operators in Indonesia. So we have a lot of homework here. So I also believe that this problem also happened in other countries. Yeah. And I'm asking you that questions because in several parts in Indonesia or in others countries, perhaps there are very high dependency of these forestry workers to the forest work. So if we simply use this heavy machinery to substitute the operator chainsaw, then they will lose their job. So meanwhile they're living nearby the forest, and at the end they will bring another social problem to the forest. That's what I think.
Yes, but I mean, we have to be, if it can be mechanized without the harm to the forest, because you have sufficient infrastructure and so on, and you have the right machines, it is felling trees, big trees, is a tough work. So I think mechanization, wherever possible, should not be stopped. It's true that it can reduce the labor amount, but we still have all the forest tending, all the other non-wood forest products that can provide important job without these risks. And at the end, I imagine also your birth rate is going down with the development, with people moving more urban and so on. And there might be a moment where just a hand work based forestry might not have sufficient people in deep rural forest dominant areas. So in that sense, I think the trade-off is in favor of machinery. And if you still have few people that have this training, as the state has to provide there is the certification on one hand, and the state has to provide the concessions. This can be an element of decision of concessions. I mean, public auctions do not have to have only an economic dimension. They can have also qualitative dimensions. Say, well, if from all these interested companies, this one has much more percentage of training, and then in this vocational training, normally you have a higher level person that can train others, so you can have a training in cascade. Yes. This can help as well to move forward.
Yes, thank you. Okay, this one last question. Actually, now we know that we are facing climate change effect, and one of these adverse effects is effect to the forestry workers because they are working outdoors. So one of the climate change effect is the rising temperature, right? So working outdoors means that they're exposed to this high temperature, which give negative effect to their reproductivity as well as their occupational health. So. But not so many parties have interest in this issue yet. So what I want to know is whether this issue can be considered as an important issue in the future. For example, we can accommodate this as one criteria, an indicator in any forest certification. Perhaps, what do you think?
Well, of course, the issue of increasing temperature is a challenge. It's in many places of the world where in the moment the temperature for frozen higher, there is the option of seasonality, and many operations are done in the cooler period of the year or in the drier period of the year, depending. And in the tropics, in the strict tropics where you don't have this seasonal element, it may be challenging. And also especially in remote places where you cannot say, well, you go much earlier and leave and come back in the later afternoon, but it's difficult to arrange. This is an issue that has to be solved, but in general, the temperature rise has been until now in the strict tropics relatively, let's say, there have been more issues of hurricanes and this kind of situation than in the temperature, especially in these very maritime areas. It is much more in other latitudes, high latitudes or middle latitudes. The temperature in proportion risen, but there you can accommodate by seasonality.
Okay, so this is the end of our discussion. So please give us your final statement to the audience.
Well, Indonesia is a very important forest nation of the world with around 100 million hectares. One of the most important tropical ones, the most important in Asia, the third after Brazil and Democratic Republic of Congo, and has an important responsibility. But it should be also approached in a way that these forests really unlock all the full potential for the local population. If they are very so important at national and global level, locals need to have also a part of the responsibility, but also of they should be acknowledged and recognized for the contribution and incorporated. They should be active actors. They should be more empowered and have the chance in certain way also to stay in the area, not to need to move to the big cities that are already too crowded, and have a good livelihood from those forests that can be combined by woods, by bamboo, by many non-wood forest products, by tourism, by tending the forest, and that they are incorporated in this important value. So we have first to unlock this value of the forest in a balanced way, and then second to ensure that it is not only supplying the globe with the climate and the urban areas, but it is always having a recognition and an option of life for rural people in these areas. And so we can also preserve the cultural legacy that frequently is overseen.
Yes, you're very right. And I'm very happy to have you here. And that's all for our discussion for today in the Pickle Corner. Thank you very much, Professor Rojes, and let's meet again next in the future. Thank you.